about this picture. Oh, of course I'm the one that did it.
Where were you standing?
So during Kabbalah's Fun, Rabbi Majeski did the little lesson. I thought it was a very good picture.
You're professional.
You still haven't been on the TikTok and it's been 2 years.
TikTok.
Instagram, you know. Oh my gosh, love you. Nadia, do you want to come to this wedding tonight? You're gonna make me emotion.
I'll take it.
Hey.
Thank you.
Oh, hey, beautiful. And I still got up at 6:30 this morning.
See, me too, but then I turned my alarm off and I got up at 7:30.
All right.
I turned off my
I got up at 6:30. I showered. I like. How are you?
I got up at 6:30, turned off like for 21, set it for 7:30. I'm not. And I'm still like this.
Oh,
Good morning, everybody. Yeah.
wow. How does it feel to have like another one married?
Baruch Hashem. Beautiful.
Oh,
8 or 7 and you still got here? Wow. Yeah.
Just move it a little bit.
Yeah. The combo of the century. What?
Okay. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, she'afel yom. Thank you, Tova, for the fresh water. Okay, this is the new mimer we're gonna do.
Tova, you're like the water carrier in all the good storms.
Yeah, and that's the bingo board. The water carrier. Oh, are we starting a new mimer?
Yeah, does anybody wanna
Yes.
be nice and give this out? Thank you.
Yes. Well, Mayim is water and water is Torah.
So, yeah,
So it's really all the same.
Thanks.
So this time of the year, what's in everybody's mind besides that school is ending is that we're approaching the month of Tammuz. So first of all, one of the dates that we're approaching is Chav Ches Sivan. Chav Ches Sivan is the day that the Rebbe arrived in America in 1941, escaped the Nazis. And that's one thing to talk about. The second thing is Gimel Tammuz. Gimel Tammuz in the generation of the Friedrich Rebbe was the day the Friedrich Rebbe went out of jail. And even though he went out of jail, he wasn't really free. He was exiled to a city called Kostroma, and he had to be there for 3 years under constant surveillance. And miraculously, after being there only for 1 week, he was freed completely. That was on Yud Beis Tammuz. That's the day we celebrate his redemption. But we also celebrate a second day, Yud Gimel Tammuz. And the reason is because on the 12th day of Tammuz, the rule was that once a week he has to come to the office to register, basically show them that he's there, he didn't run away somewhere. Because there was nothing physical that he was sort of in a place that he was locked in, but he wasn't allowed to leave the city. So when he came to register, it was actually a public holiday. Nevertheless, they informed him that he is going out of jail. But because it's a public holiday, they can't give him the official documents. So he has to wait a day. And as a result of that, we have 2 Yom Tovim, 2 days which we celebrate. We don't say Tachron, Yud Beis, and Yud Gimel. And it's interesting to find the same with the Alter Rebbe. It's Yutas Kislev and Chav Kislev. And the same as the Mittel Rebbe. He was informed that he's going out of jail on Tes, but he went out on Yud. But then, of course, we have Gimel Tammuz that's most related to us in our generation. The day that the Rebbe is no longer visible to us, and the day that created a lot of concealment in this world, the ultimate concealment, which hopefully will bring the ultimate is Galus.
I don't know if you can hear us here, but we don't see or hear you. You're frozen.
But this idea that when 10 Jews get together, there's a higher presence of Shekhinah in the room that applies to men and applies to women. And applies to what? Not children. Has to be, I mean, any Yid has a connection to Hashem, but there's a certain higher level of Shekhinah that just like with men, it's only when they're bar mitzvah. So with women also, it's probably also bas mitzvah. And children, it's a different level of Shekhinah, lower level. We'll
Sorry, the Zoom crashed. What is it, a Sarah Shio stream or?
Yes.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
So the Mishnah continues, Menayim afilu chamisha. How do we know that even 5, the Shekhinah is there? Shenemar v'agudosa al eretz yisoda. There's a pasuk that it says Agudosa al eretz yisoda, and Rashi says Aguda is 5. And that means that with this 5 Yidden, the Shekhinah is there. Umenayim afilu shleisha. And where do we know that even 3 Yidden together is the presence of Shekhinah? Shenemar, because it says, B'kerev Elokim Yishpet, that Hashem is found amongst those that judge, and the minimum of judges is 3. That means where there's 3 people, the Shekhinah is there. Umenayim afilu shnayim. How do we know that even 2? Shenemar, because it says, As nidbru yirei Hashem ish re'eyu, that the people that are God-fearing will be talking to each other. V'yakshiv Hashem v'yishma, and Hashem will be listening to their conversation. So we see that if 2 Yidden are studying Torah together, there's also a presence of Shekhinah. So how do we know that even if 1 Yid is learning Torah, the Shekhinah is there? Because it says, B'chol mokem asher asker shmi, wherever you will mention my name. Rashi says this means Klema she'eten das belibcha lahasker shmi. I'll put it into your heart to mention my name. Ovei elecha, I will come to you. V'rechticha, and I will bless you. This means afilu gamim rak echad yeshig v'yisig b'Torah. So even if 1 Yid is sitting and studying Torah, rei mamshech gili alakus. So of course, just to understand this on a basic level, it doesn't mean that if 10 people are learning together, Hashem is there. Hashem is everywhere. So what does it mean when we say the Shekhinah is there? Shekhinah always means Gili Alakus. Godliness is more revealed than the average. The same with the Beis HaMikdash. That we just learned it not that long ago in Tanya, in the chapter 51, where the Alter Rebbe asks the same question about the Beis HaMikdash. What does it mean that the Shekhinah is in the Beis HaMikdash? The Shekhinah is everywhere. And the answer is no, Hashem is everywhere. But where is Hashem revealed in a much greater measure? That's in the Beis HaMikdash. What does it mean practically? It means that that's a place where we can feel and sense the presence of Hashem because He is there in a much more open way. Naturally, tzaddikim experience it much stronger, and regular people might feel it subconsciously, but the Shekhinah is there in a more revealed way. So what does it mean when it says here that if there's 10 people, the Shekhinah is there, it's more revealed? But he said that even 1 person studies Torah, the Shekhinah is more revealed. Even 2 people, even 3 people, 5 people. So of course 10 people. Why do you even have to mention anything about 10 if 5 is also the Shekhinah, and 3 are also the Shekhinah, and 2 and 1? So the answer is there are many levels in Shekhinah, which means when we say godliness is revealed, that's a general statement. But if we go into the details, there are many levels in Shekhinah. Just like the Gemara says, the Gemara speaks in a little bit of a different language, but it's the same idea. Eser Kedushes, hey, there are 10 levels of Kedusha. And what is the Gemara referring to? Gemara is referring to 10 levels of Kedusha that actually there are halachic ramifications. Eretz Yisrael is holier than any other country in the world. That's 1. Yerushalayim is holier than any other city in Eretz Yisrael. The Har Habayis, the mountain, is holier than the whole city, which means there are certain halachas that apply only to Eretz Yisrael, not to any other place in the world. Then there are more halachas that apply only to Yerushalayim, not to any other city. Then there are halachas that apply only to the mountain, not to all of Yerushalayim. And then there are halachas that apply to the place where the Beis HaMikdash was standing. It goes on and on and on. And the highest level is the Kodesh HaKadosh, the Holy of Holies. So in the Gemara's language, it's Eser Kodesh saying, but what does it mean? It means that there are 10 levels in how much Hashem Shekhinah is revealed. So it starts off that the highest level of Hashem Shekhinah being revealed is 10. In Tanya it says that if a malach, if an angel would be in a place where the Shekhinah is revealed, where 10 Yidden are, the malach would be overwhelmed that he would expire. Why don't we expire? Because we don't see. We don't see, we don't feel. And also, Yidden are on a different level than malachim. But malachim, they see openly. And tzaddikim also see openly. When a tzaddik walks into a place where the Shekhinah is there, he knows the difference between that and he sees the difference between that and an ordinary place. I think I once told you that the Rebbe Rashab and the Friedrich Rebbe were traveling and they walked through a marketplace somewhere. So Rebbe Rashab said to the Friedrich Rebbe, apparently somebody must have once davened mincha here. In other words, he recognized that there is some sort of Shechina in this place, and he recognized that it's a result of davening, not other mitzvahs, and he recognized there was mincha, not any other part of davening. The Havdil, if you walk into a room and you say, I think someone was eating pickles here before. How do you know? Because you smell the smell of the pickles.
Smart person.
Right. I mean, probably that couldn't be if it was 10 years earlier, but if it was 10 minutes earlier or an hour earlier, you'll smell the pickles, which means there's something there. Baruchni is there's an impression that's left forever. And a tzaddik walks in and he could sense it. There was
Rabbi Majeski.
yeah.
So if the malachim and we don't feel, so we're not gonna expire. But it's Sabbath, feels it, and then it's fine.
Because in that sense, neshamas have a certain advantage over malachim, right? The Rebbe Marash, before he became Rebbe, was traveling, and he came to a city. I don't know if it was the city of bells or somewhere where the bells Rebbe was there. Probably was his city. And he traveled. He looked like a businessman. He looked like anybody else. And the Belzer Rebbe, that Belzer Rebbe, was blind. So people would lead him. He walks into the shul, and they're leading him, and suddenly he turns, telling me, no, we're going this way. No, I know where I'm going. And he, who was blind, led them to the Rebbe Marash and gave him Shalom Aleichem and asked him to sit next to him, which means he walked in, he right away sensed there's something very holy over here. When the Rebbe Marash came back home, he told his father, Tzemach Tzedek, what happened. So Tzemach Tzedek said, you're trying to hide from someone that has open Ruach HaKodesh. In other words, people like that, they sense the Kedusha, they see it, just like we see things that are here begashmis. So where there are 10 people learning together, the Shekhinah is there. But still there's a difference between one person who studies Torah and when there's 10 people studying Torah. That the Rabbim bring down a higher level. What I just told you and what it says here is not the same thing. What I told you was the difference of the Shekhinah is more revealed or less revealed. But here it says something even deeper. It's a higher level of Shekhinah to begin with. In other words, if we were to say that Malchus of Atzilus, when you say the word Shekhinah, for someone who's not Chassidus, Shekhinah, there's nothing else to talk about. But when you learn Chassidus, you know, well, there's Atzilus, there's Bria, there's Yitzira. In each world, there are 10 spheres. So what specific level or aspect is shining in that place? So that's the second difference. That in, let's say, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it wasn't just that godliness was more revealed. The level of godliness that was shining in the Kodesh HaKadoshim was infinitely higher than the level of godliness that was shining in other places. And here too, not only that when there's 10 people together, the godly light that's there is more revealed, but that the level of godliness, the place where it's coming from, is from a higher level. This means that when there are a lot of people together, they draw down a much higher level of Shekhinah. And now he's going to draw a parallel between learning and davening. Just like it applies to davening, Shomer Azal, our sages say, Tfilas Rabbim Eino Nemesis. When a group of people daven together, which is a minyan, that's a kind of a tefillah that's not rejected by Hashem. When a person davens alone on his own, it could be rejected, it could not be rejected. When people daven with a minyan, then it's not rejected. Shenemar, hein kein kabir lo yimus, that your prayers will not be rejected by Hashem. And why not? That when people daven together with a minyan, they draw down Hashem's Yudgimel Midas Rachman. What's Yudgimel Midas Rachman? The source of Yudgimel Midas Rachman is in Chumash, Pashas Kisisa. The Yidden committed an Aveira. This Aveira is the worst Aveira that ever was committed in history, and that's the Aveira of the Egel Azov. They worshipped the Egel Azov. It was the worst in history, not only because of the Zara, but because of the whole background, all the details associated with it. They just went out of Mitzrayim. They just saw miracle upon miracle upon miracle upon miracle. And they just received the Torah, which means they saw Hashem revealed in the most revealed way, which never was and never will be until Mashiach comes. And after all that, just a short time later, they're already totally being not loyal to Hashem and worshiping a golden calf. So this was considered the worst Aveira in history. And yet Moshe Rabbeinu was davening to Hashem, and how did he manage to bring that Hashem should forgive us? Because he drew down Yud Gimel Midas Rachman. So that means there's two attributes of Rachman, of compassion. One is it's one of the spheres, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes is Rachamim, compassion. So it's one of the 10 spheres. There's another Rachamim which is above that, and that's called Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim, the 13 attributes of mercy, and that comes from a much higher class. That comes from a place which is Ein Sof, which is unlimited. So when the Rachamim is a limited compassion, then it depends. If you do this and this, it's a bad thing, but I'll be compassionate and I'll forgive you. But if you do something worse, that I'm not ready to forgive. It could be more than that. I'll forgive that also, but something worse, that I won't forgive. But when it's Yud Gimel Midas Harachman, which means infinite compassion, unlimited compassion, then there's nothing that could stand in the way. So even in Aveira, like Egel Azov, Hashem was ready to forgive. So generally speaking, when people daven with a minyan, and that's why it's daven with the minyan, by doing that, you draw down and you connect to your. And if it's a Gimel Sarachman, you're not rejected, because that's something which is it's an unconditional compassion, unconditional rachamim. So even if I don't deserve, I still will be forgiven, and Hashem will fulfill my request. Yeah.
But you said that like the minyan could be only with boys when it's like praying and stuff like that. Will it work like the and like whatever like it means will work like on women as well when we're there?
So I can tell you what I know from where I know it from. So what I don't know, I don't know. The Rebbe is the one that said this point, that anytime 10 Yidden get together regarding any mitzvah, it's at a much higher level because it's being done together. So there's 10 people in a room, everybody giving tzedakah, the tzedakah is greater. They're learning, their learning is greater. They're davening, their davening is greater. Whatever they're doing, Fabrengen is greater. And the Rebbe said this applies to men and applies to women also. Exactly which of the levels, in other words, you might ask me a question, which is, if it's true that the Shekhinah is there, so why can't women why can't they have a minyan? Why can't women be part of a minyan? Not talking about the women reading the Torah, but they should be able to make a minyan just like men, that you could read from the Torah and so on. So obviously, it means that the level of Shekhinah or the aspect of Shekhinah that's necessary for Baruch Hu, for Kriyas HaTorah, and those things is different. In general, we know that women are connected to Malchus and men are connected to Zoh, which are the 6 midas. Which means, just like down here, there's masculine and there's feminine, up there, there's also masculine and feminine. Sometimes the Shekhinah is called our father, sometimes the Shekhinah is our mother, sometimes the Shekhinah is our brother, and sometimes the Shekhinah is our sister, and sometimes the Shekhinah is our daughter. There's different terms used to describe the Shekhinah. So the reason for this is because there's masculine and feminine. So when men get together, we bring down the level of Shekhinah that's connected to our neshama. When women get down together, they bring down the level of Shekhinah related to their neshama. So the reason why men could say Baruch Hu and read from the Torah and say Kaddish and Kedusha, when there's 10 men, obviously the level of Shekhinah, the aspect of Shekhinah that's drawn down by men is what you need for these things. Women also bring down a higher level of Shekhinah, but not that aspect. That's what's understood. Whether it's you'd give me the Sarachim or not, that I don't know. I'm afraid to make up my own things. But it could be that even in Gimel Sarachim, there are different levels of how much is revealed. But here in the Maimon, it doesn't go into that point. But one thing is clear that when women get together, there is a much higher level of Isgalus of Shekhinah. So just like in reference to davening, when you daven together with the meaning, you have access to the Gimel Sarachamim, Kamekin, Adei Torah Barabim. So when you learn Torah together as a group, Nimsha Gila it also brings down a higher level of Shekhinah. And also connects to Gimel Sarachim. Where do we see that connection? In the Siddur, I would assume most women don't say that part of the davening, but in the Siddur, every day, the part that the men say, which is before Haidu, is a brisa, which starts off that Rabbi Shmuel says that there are 13 ways of learning in Torah, which means there are 13 methods how to derive things from the written Torah to the oral Torah, how we know these halachas. This is one way, that's another way, a third way, and so on. Altogether 13. One of them, let's say, is Kal V'Chemer. Everyone knows what a Kal V'Chemer is? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Kal V'Chemer is one of the methods. There are 12 other methods. One is called Gzeir Shavim. That means that the things that are in Torah in a hidden way, how do they become revealed? And it should be more open, which means this reveals the light of the Torah. It's through the 13 attributes, 13 methods. So these 13, each and every one of these methods of the 13, it teaches us something new. For example, Mida Rishena, she Kal V'Chemer. Kal V'Chemer. He melamed inyan chodesh b'Torah. It means that without the Kal V'Chemer, what does Kal V'Chemer mean? That the Torah says a halacha about a certain halacha. And then we say if the halacha applies to this case, then in the other case it surely applies. So the Torah doesn't write it explicitly because it's not necessary. Once it says that this is prohibited or this is supposed to be done, then how much more so than the other thing is supposed to be done? That's Kal V'Chemer, which means through Kal V'Chemer you learn new things in Torah that you wouldn't know otherwise. In Canaan is a Mokra Torah. That means that the 13 methods are certain gateways that this is sort of the source of how Torah becomes revealed. Which means the Kol, Mida, Umida, every one of these methods, Megala, Torah, Begili, Beprotius Yosef, reveals more details. Like, for example, Tefillin. If you look into the Chumash, you'd have no clue whatsoever how to put on tefillin. Right? What does it say in Shema? This thing should be a sign on your hand and tetafes between your eyes. If you would just look there, you would have no idea what in the world you're supposed to do with tefillin. So everything is the oral Torah. And the oral Torah is derived from the written Torah. So the same thing is with everything else. In the Torah, things are written in a more general way. And then the oral Torah goes into the specifics and the details. So, Tamadavar, what's the reason why there are 13 methods? So this is the point that he's bringing out. That Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim, normally we associate it with davening. Here we see the association with Torah. Torah has 13 sort of channels, and in Midas Harachmim there are 13 channels, because the 13 channels of Midas Harachmim are the source and connected to the 13 methods that are in Torah. For example, we see the Mezritch Magid says this in reference to Kal V'Chomer. Kasher Hiskir Moshe Rabbeinu Olav HaShalom Mida Risheni Yud Midas Harachmim. So this happens to be related to this week's Parsha. At the end of this week's Parsha, we learn about Miriam. Miriam and Aaron were talking about Moshe. And they're talking about the fact that Moshe was divorced or distanced himself from his wife. And they were saying, why did he have to do that? We're also Nevi'im, we're also prophets, but we didn't have to do that. And then she was punished with leprosy, tsaras. By the way, just want to point something out. This is so important that we say it every day, right? There are 6 things you're supposed to remember every day. And one of them is always remember what happened to Miriam in the desert. So the Rambam makes a very interesting point. Miriam didn't say anything bad about Moshe. What did she say? Miriam did not understand until Hashem said these words. She thought of Moshe as a very big tzaddik, as a very big Navi, a Navi like she and her brother Aaron. She didn't realize that Moshe Rabbeinu is a Navi on a whole different level completely. And that's what it says in the Chumash. That Moshe Rabbeinu is not a Navi like all other Navim. He's totally in a different level completely. And therefore, don't expect that he should be doing the same thing you do. So the Rambam writes, imagine, Miriam didn't speak anything negative. It wasn't real Lashon Hara. What happened was, she didn't speak about Moshe Rabbeinu according to his real, true level. How much more so when you actually speak Mamash Lashon Hara? That's what the Rambam says. So we see an interesting thing that every day we're supposed to remember that when you think about Moshe Rabbeinu, to realize that he is a tzaddik of a whole different caliber completely. In the times of the Alter Rebbe, there was another Rebbe by the name of Shlomo Karliner, Shlomo of Karlin, very big tzaddik. And he was also known that he performed open miracles. So the Alter Rebbe once said about him that he is like 1 tefach off the ground. Everybody know what a tefach is? It's a measurement like this. So he's a 1 tefach above the ground, and he sweeps away the laws of nature like with a broom. Pretty good level. In other words, to him, nature doesn't get in the way. There's something natural that stops you, he sweeps it away, like you take a broom and you sweep things off the floor. Then the Alter Rebbe said, and there are other tzaddikim that are alapayim amma above the ground. Alapayim amma is 2,000 ammas. There are 6 of these in 1 amma. Alapayim amma is 2,000 times 6 tvachim. Tzemach Tzedek said, Alter Rebbe was referring to himself. In other words, even amongst tzaddikim, there are levels and levels and levels. And that's what happened here, that Aaron and Miriam they themselves were probably one of the greatest Nevi'im compared to all other Nevi'im, Aaron and Moshe. And yet they thought of, now Aaron and Miriam, and yet they thought of Moshe like them. That's not so terrible. But it was terrible because Moshe Rabbeinu was in a different caliber completely. Loi Kain Avdi Moshe, my servant Moshe is not what you think. He's a whole different level. So what happened was that because of that, she was had leprosy. And as a result of that, they didn't travel, they waited for her. So Moshe Rabbeinu davened, and he said, Keil na rafana Allah. These were his words. Hashem, hail her. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So why did Hashem answer him? Kal v'chemer. The Ksiv, Vayema Hashem al Moshe, Haloisi kolim shivas yamim chulu, which means, Amar Azal, Kal v'chemer l'shchina. The Eibishter said to Moshe Rabbeinu that imagine if somebody would do that, say something against their father, wouldn't they be sort of locked in for 7 days? So how much more so when you said something which was an offense to the Shechina? Basically, what Hashem said was a kal v'chemer. If this would happen to an ordinary person, how much more so the Shechina? So as soon as the Eibishter said the kal v'chemer, in other words, what you find here is your gimel midas harachmim, which is kel narafana Allah, and the Eibishter, as a result of that, said kal v'chemer. So he's bringing where we can see that the 13 attributes of mercy and the 13 methods of Torah are connected to each other and they're parallel to each other. So that means that through the 13 attributes of mercy, we draw down the 13 gates sort of Torah. This is regarding Kal V'chemer. Where do we see the 13 attributes of mercy? Because Moshe Rabbeinu said, Keil na rafana Allah. And the name Keil is the first of the 13 attributes. I know when you say the 13 attributes, Hashem, Keil, Racham, Chanu, Rechapayim, Reb Chesed, Vemnes, Chesed, Lofnes. How do you know which is what? So you don't know where to stop. But there is a place in the Siddur, by the way. The place is by Tashlich. It actually shows you exactly which is the first, which is the second, which is the third, which is the 13th. But Keil is the first. So as Moshe Rabbeinu mentioned the first of the attributes, what do we hear after that? A Kal V'chemer. So we see that the 13 attributes of mercy lead to the 13 midas of Torah. The same applies to all 13. We bring the 13 midas harachman. This explains what our sages say. There's a pasuk, Haroya b'Shoshanim, the famous pasuk, Ani l'Deidi v'Deidi li, and finishes off Haroya b'Shoshanim, pastures in Shoshanim, which is roses. So the Gemara says, Al tikra Shoshanim, don't read it only as Shoshanim, as roses. There's another meaning to the words. Shoshanim, they study. Shoshanim b'halachas, they study Torah. In other words, that's alluding to people who learn Torah. But the literal meaning is a rose. Isa b'Zohar, so the Zohar says, Man Shoshana, who is the rose, Knesset Yisrael. So Shoshana is actually one of the names of Yidden. And why do we compare Yidden to a Shoshana, to a rose? Ma Shoshana is but Tleiser Alin, just like a rose has 13 leaves. Uv Knesset Yisrael is but Tleiser Mechilin Derachman. Yidden also have the 13 attributes of mercy. The Sachrale Mikol Sitraha. These 13 attributes encompass us from all sides, which is we draw down the 13 attributes through Torah. So the same word, Shoshana, which means a rose that is made up of 13 parts, also means learning Torah, which is made up of 13 parts. And that's the mile of Yidden, that we, through studying Torah, we draw down Yidginus Racham. But mainly when you study Torah B'Rabbi. Just like davening is mainly when you study Torah B'Rabbi. Yeah.
Can you mention the 13 parts of Torah?
All 13?
Oh, just at least mention it.
Well, they're in the Siddur. Right before Haidu, you have them all written out. It starts off, Rabbi Shmuel says, and then it says all 13. Okay, to be continued. You're welcome.
What's
But he